Good morning, friend. Thanks for joining us here on the Key Radio Morning Show. Your co-hosts, Grant Burkhalter and yours truly, Heather Zander. And in the studio with us today is Pastor Chad Johnson of Fellowship Bible Church in Linden, Utah, who braved the snow and the sleet and the hail to come all the way to the Provo studios. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here. It really wasn't that bad.
I know.
It was okay. Did you guys get a new intro song?
How come everybody's, it's been like 2 months? Yes.
2 months. How long has it been since I've been here? It's been a bit, you guys. It's glad
so
to
funny.
be back in the studio. 2 months, seriously?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
maybe?
think we've had it since like the new year.
Yeah.
Well, my apologies
No, it's okay.
for not noticing.
That's all right. It's not that important.
Well,
You
for
can
what it's-
remember the important stuff, and we'll worry about all the little
for what
frivolous
it's
stuff,
worth,
right?
it was nice.
Oh, yeah.
I approve. Not that you want approval after 2 months.
Oh, you know what? We'll take what we can get around here.
Okay.
We'll take what we can get. What's
Yeah.
going on, Fellowship Bible Church?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
I
plugging,
have no idea.
plugging through life. I feel like we're so simple. Like we don't really have a lot of this big event coming up or this. But life is really good. It's active. It's busy. People are together. And when people come together on Sundays, it's just a lot of joy. We see the Lord doing a lot of good things in a lot of people's hearts and lives just through conversations and talking with other people as they are with people. We are really thankful for the ministry that we get to be a part of. We had a meeting after church just last Sunday, kind of a family meeting, and really invited the whole church and just said, hey, just come in here. We love to be organized. We love to just be able to share our heart, and here's where we see God working. And that was a really encouraging time, really unifying time. And I left just really smiling, really thankful for the unity that we have as a church family at Fellowship Bible Church. And so as a shepherd and as a pastor of Fellowship Bible Church, I just am really grateful for the Lord's grace, the Lord's grace on me, on my family, on our church family, and can really see it at work in tangible ways. So
I
I'm a
love it.
thankful
That's so
person.
different than like a business, right? Like, you have a meeting and then you come away smiling. No, you come away
Yeah.
smiling. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really special.
It's family, and the
Yeah.
family was there and gathered, and we were able to emphasize that aspect that we're not a business. We have business items, but we're a family. And so people really seemed engaged and really just overall, not just at a meeting, but overall in the life of the church, there's really a home atmosphere that it's really fun to be a part of.
Very cool.
So-
Very cool. So Fellowship Bible Church Linden, how would a person get in touch with the church if they wanted to?
Well, you should just come. Like
Would you just come already?
just come and see. Come taste and see that the Lord is good. Not even that the church is good, but just come and see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I think we have a home that has life, a home that has joy, that's one way. And if you just want to check it out, we're fbclinden.org is the website. We've got an app you can download, and you can kind of look into some things there. We're kind of in an app world nowadays. So if you want to take advantage of that, FBC Linden, if you search in any of the app stores, FBC Linden, it should pop up there. 10:30 on Sundays, website. I don't know what else to say, Heather.
I love it. It's just so simple.
Yeah,
Don't make a
yeah.
big deal of it. Just come. That's all right. That's all good.
Right. So, or connect right here at Key Radio.
That's right. Let us
And
know
they'll-
and we'll connect you. That's what we do.
And
That's what
really
we
just
do.
to any local church, right? If
Yeah,
someone's
which-
just looking for a church, and if someone's looking to check into churches, like there's so many good Bible teaching, gospel believing, just building their church on the authority of the Word of God churches throughout this valley. And I know you've got great resources to connect people to those churches.
Yeah. And by the way, can I just say that Resurrection Sunday is coming up as well, and that's on the 31st of March. That might be a really good time to just kind of visit a church in your area and just worship the Lord and see what Resurrection Sunday is all about. Sure, but I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. a good Bible church is going to celebrate the resurrection every Sunday.
Right.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's what Christians celebrate, is the fact that
Yeah.
Jesus has defeated our enemies, sin and death.
It's
right?
our life source.
Yeah.
It's why we gather on the Lord's Day. It's why on Sundays we open the doors and say, come on in. It's time to worship, because our God isn't dead. Our God is alive. He has defeated the grave and has called us unto being worshipers,
Yeah.
to seek and save lost people, to reset our lives away from the worship of created things into the worship of the one true God. And it's most visibly demonstrated in the life, death, and burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So come and gather and worship.
Yes. And so what I'd like to do, so if you are interested in going to a Bible believing church and you want some recommendations or whatever, just call us, okay? We'd just love to have a discussion with you. Or you can connect with any of the pastors and churches that, we just are friends with and that you hear on Key Radio. But just remember, Easter they'll probably have a service definitely on Easter Sunday, probably at the same time they usually, but maybe not. Like maybe there is something special that they do prior to that. So recognizing that Easter's a little bit different. And I just wanted to share a couple of changes for some of the churches. Like, for instance, if you are in the Payson area, Orchard Hills Bible Church, so Santa Quinn, whatever, consider that. But they have a Good Friday service as well, and that's on March 29th. That's at 7 p.m. And then on Sunday, of course, they're normal times. So that's important to know. Also, Aspen Grove Bible Church in Spanish Fork, they're going to have an Easter service, of course, but they said come early for an Easter breakfast together at 9 a.m. So consider that. Also, if you are in the Sevier Valley area, that'd be Richfield and Monroe and Joseph and so on, it looks as though Calvary Chapel Sevier Valley is having an Easter service, but it's going to be held not at the church. It's going to be held at the Sevier Valley Center in Richfield, 31st, of course, Easter, at 10 a.m. And then they're going to have a lot of other stuff, too. So make sure that you remember that, mark that down. Alpine Bible Church, they're going to have an Easter celebration, but not at their church. It's going to be at Snow Springs Elementary School in Lehigh at 11 a.m. on Sunday. So remember that. Also, let's see here. It looks as though, who am I looking at here? Oh, Utah Valley Church. I'm sorry. And they are going to have a Good Friday service as well. And that Good Friday service is going to be at 7 p.m. at the Angelus Theater. And, of course, Easter Sunday at 10:30 at the same place. So those are just some things that we've noted that we've been told that we should share with you. And so there's a couple of extra special things as well, just because of this season. Anything else, like for Fellowship Bible Church? Is there anything?
Yeah, we've got an Easter brunch that we're going to be doing at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So 9 o'clock to 10:30ish, just a time to come and hang out and enjoy a brunch together. And so that'll be just at our facilities, 375 North State Street in Linden, right in the heart of the valley. So we'd love to meet you. Come on out. We'll feed you. If you want to bring something, you can. But
Bring yourself.
Just come.
Just bring
Don't worry
yourself.
about bringing anything. Just come. We'll feed you.
And then, friend, if you are a homeschool parent or you think about being a homeschool parent or whatever, guess what? There are resources for you. And what better way than to attend a convention? It's the 29th annual convention. It's on April 12th through the 13th. And that is going to be located at Canyons Church in Salt Lake City. More information will be given to you, but I just wanted you to know about that and maybe throw it on your calendar again. Flip the calendar over, April 12th through the 13th. And so there we go. I think that's all the housekeeping we have. Grant, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope.
Oh, well, already then. I was like, oh, Grant's here. Oh, man. Well, let's get started in our conversation today. And by the way, if you have any questions, just email us or whatever, or mail at keyradio.org. We'll help. We'll try to accommodate the needs that you have there. But we are in the study of Judges, and we are spending a long time talking about Gideon. But to be fair, there's a lot of real estate in the Bible about our friend Gideon, not only in Judges, but also he's mentioned in the book of Hebrews, which is actually very fascinating, especially in light of what we're going to be talking about today. Grant, give us a sum up of what is going on with Gideon's life here real quickly, because I think some of us are like, we need a refresher, like me.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Let's see. We were in Judges chapter 6 is where Gideon's story starts. And in the time of Judges, this is a time in Israel's history, the nation of Israel, where they don't have they don't have a king. They are governed instead by this document, the Law of Moses, that kind of just outlines how their nation is supposed to be run. And as long as they live according to the law, everything is fine. But what ends up happening is the nation of Israel is influenced heavily by the pagan nations around them, and instead of worshiping God and worshiping God the way that He has prescribed, the way that He's told them He is to be worshipped, they instead are going after the gods of the nations around them. They're kind of hedging their bets spiritually, so to speak. They might worship God, but they also, celebrate, the pagan holidays around them. They worship the pagan gods, particularly Baal and Asheroth, and so they kind of have these altars set up, in their town squares, and as a result of this, God sends these very nations of whose gods they're celebrating to invade them. So they rise up, and there's this one people group called the Midianites, and the Midianites are oppressing the Israelites. They team up with the Amalekites, and they're coming in, and they're just destroying the Israelites' crops. They're just coming in and just decimating everything that the Israelites have built up for themselves. There's so much oppression that this dude Gideon, he's threshing his wheat. So that's the process of getting rid of all the chaff and just getting the wheat. So he's beating the wheat and getting rid of the stalks and the leaves and the stuff you don't want. But he's doing it in a pit, in a wine press. So he's hiding from the Midianites, and he's in this wine press. And then the angel of the Lord appears to him and says, "Hey, you are going to be this military leader, and you are going to save your fellow Israelites. You're going to save them from this oppression." And Gideon rightfully says, "Who, me?" And just through this big long, God has this plan where Gideon is supposed to take 300 men, and they take pots, and they take torches, and they take trumpets, and this is the weapons of war that they're supposed to use, and they surround the Midianites, and they break the pots, and they light their torches, and they blow their trumpets, and they shout, "Sword for the Lord and for Gideon." And the Midianites, even though there are thousands of them, they all freak out, and they start attacking each other and fleeing. And so what we see in chapter 7 is that they're completely routed, and this is completely an act of God using Gideon. And the foreign kings are on the run, and I think chapter 7 ends with them capturing the two leaders of Midian, Oreb and Zeb.
Mm-hmm. I just love the angel of the Lord says, "Hey." It's like, it sounded like Fonzie.
Hey.
That's why I was laughing. I'm like, "Hey."
Ready for war.
Sorry. Oh, I get so easily distracted.
Hey, yo, Gideon, what you doing in that pit?
Oh, dear me. So this is crazy. It's a guy who he even recognizes, I'm from the smallest tribe. I'm from my family's not even that remarkable, and I'm not remarkable. I'm the lowest of the low. And what are you talking about? And that, I think, again, we look back at the Lord and how the Lord uses the small, the insignificant, the foolish in order to shame the wise, right? Yeah. Because the whole point is, I'm the one delivering you, says God. There's nothing good Like you're nothing. You're nothing.
You blew a trumpet.
That's congratulations. Well done.
Yeah.
And this is just so the whole thing is just incredibly fascinating. And the thing is too, we give Gideon a hard time in the beginning because remember he's got the fleece thing going on, and he's like, okay, Lord, I'm going to put out a fleece, and then you make that wet, but the ground dry, and the next day, okay, do the opposite, and and we're like, oh, Gideon, and yet we are seeing that the Lord is really patient with him, is walking with him. I mean, and then the Lord does this amazing thing. And as Gideon walks with the Lord, as Gideon obeys God, his faith grows deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really an important thing where we talked about in James, faith without works is dead. Talk about that a lot. That's not salvific. What that's talking about is, you know what? If you have faith in something, you believe in something, you're going to act like it. You're going to step out in faith. It's not like a tentative, maybe God will do this, maybe he won't. But you're like, no, I'm going to do this because I believe in God.
Yeah.
I put my faith in him and not in myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And Gideon did. Like he took these steps of faith. He was. And we have to look at it from the Lord, right? The Lord gave him courage. The Lord gave him faith. The Lord is the one to be praised. And that's, chapter 6 and 7, as you're describing it all, life's pretty good. Like God's really using him. God's equipping him, empowering him. He's honoring, he's following, he's doing what God asked him to do with the angel of the Lord and from the angel of the Lord, and that message being used by God. He gets a word from God. He heads off to war. He's conquering enemies. He's got, it's just loaded with, wow, like the kite is soaring. Life is good. And it's wonderful. He's a national hero. There's the support and adoration from the people of God. And it's like, then you get to chapter 8 and things kind of it's so much good, but what you see through life, and I think you see it in Gideon's life, is these seasons. And James talks about it as well. I'm always talking about James because I just finished preaching it, but there's these tests of faith, these tests, these seasons of life, these opportunities that God gives us to test our faith, to see where it's at, to grow it, to strengthen it. And you see through the course of Gideon's life, like God strengthening and empowering. He's leaning in and he's giving God glory and praise. One of the most interesting things, because I read yesterday afternoon, I just read Judges 6 through 8 and was kind of trying to get my mind a little bit, like didn't deep dive into all of this, but just made some observations. And what I found was chapter 6 and 7 is full of worship. Chapter 6 and 7, you see him praying. You see him praying with God's people. You see them seeking the Lord. You see them praising God. You see the worship that exudes from Gideon and from God's people all throughout those two chapters. Chapter 8 has none of that. And I think that's one of what cues us into this. We're going to see this trajectory, I would call it, towards just an increasing pride, just an increasing sort of not giving God the glory, not getting frustrated with the circumstances that are around him, being impacted by the different circumstances that were rising up, the way people were responding, the way people were not responding, the way he thought people should have been responding. And you see a frustration, an exhaustion, this man that just boils over in chapter 8. And it leads to not the greatest end of a life. It's going to be a lot of, hopefully, some good takeaways that we can see for what is it going to look like to end life well. But you see this ebb and flow of a guy that genuinely was following the Lord, knows the Lord, and but what does that look like when you start to rely on your own strength? What does that look like when you're not worshiping, when you're more impacted by the circumstances around you instead of him who is working through you? And I think that's some of the things that helps us go into chapter 8.
Yes. No, I think that's absolutely spot on. Let's talk about this. So they capture the two princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They kill Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb they killed at the winepress. So I'm looking at the end of 7 here. And then they pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. I'm going to skip 8 and 1 just because I think that we'll go back to that. Gideon then came to the Jordan. I'm on 8:4, over, and the 300 men who were with him, exhausted yet pursuing. Okay, so remember, it's not just, okay, we defeated them, but they're pursuing these guys because, you could sweep the house, but if the mice are still in there, you got to get the mice
Still
out,
the
right?
leftovers.
We got to get the mice out.
Yeah.
And so Gideon and the 300 guys, remember, there's only 300 guys. And by the way, later we're going to find out that there was 135,000 guys who were there, so they're defeating, but they're pursuing them. And he said to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. So there's more kings, okay? Now, what's interesting about this is that he's asking his countrymen to feed his guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the official said, oh, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand that we should give you bread to your army?
Thanks a lot.
I'm hungry.
All I want is a sandwich. Man.
Oh, okay. This is bad on a couple of. Number one, you have to remember. I just read this morning in my studies here, where we're starting to get into the law of Moses in my morning devotions, and one of the things, God has a lot of compassion toward the alien, right? Like the foreigner, because remember that the Israelites were foreigners in Egypt. And so he's like, you need to extend hospitality to the strangers and foreigners, right? These are your own guys. And you are supposed to extend hospitality and love to your family too.
Yeah.
And here, these guys in Sukkoth, they're like, get your own sandwich.
Yeah.
This is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of politics going on there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they're being oppressed by the Midianites. This is it's you're only a rebel if you get caught. Otherwise, you're a revolutionary, right? So it depends on who wins. And so if Gideon wins, Gideon is this great hero.
Mm-hmm.
But if the Lord was not with Gideon, then the Midianites would have defeated Gideon, and this whole rebellion would have been squashed, and the people who were with him, who had aligned with him, even if all they did was give him a sandwich, they would have been, punished for assisting the rebels. So there's a lot of risk here if you don't believe that God is with Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
But since God was with Gideon, Gideon was clearly going to win. And Gideon says that here. He says, the Lord has given them into my hands. And when I come back, you're going to get it. So there's this, it's easy for us to look at that and be like, what's the big deal? It was just some bread. But really, by giving them bread, it was a huge risk.
I would press into that though, Grant, because here it is. They're your brothers, right?
Right.
And it's not like the Midianites were just oppressing Gideon's family. I mean, this was an oppression of the country. The Midianites were everywhere. The Midianites did not care who they were oppressing, and they were evil, evil people. And all of these people, the Israelites, had this obligation to follow the Lord. They had an obligation to each other because they were brothers. And so by saying, no, we're stepping back, this is worse than ever saying, hey, Gideon, why did you, like the Ephraimites will say later, Gideon, why did you call us? We could have helped, right? This was something different. They were actually saying, you know what? I think they sided with the Midianites.
Right.
Is what's going on.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. Was I'm not saying this is right. I'm saying this is where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you 100% that this was a very wrong thing to do. It was unlawful for them to deny their brothers bread. But that's kind of the whole point of the situation. The mess they're in was they are not following after God. They're following after these foreign gods. They're aligning themselves with the nations surrounding themselves instead of with God and with their people.
Yeah, their eyes are not on the Lord. They're on people. They're on the circumstances. They're on what their whole perspective they were doing right in their own eyes. Everyone was doing right. Even God's people, they were not leaning into the law and what God had said, and so much, even from Leviticus, of take care of your own.
Right.
Like, love your own. Like, this is, if you got family, like, and you're going to see even Gideon as a result of this, he's going to start to, the response, I mean, he's going to start mistreating his own. So you just see this downward spiral that's happening from doing things from your own perspective, doing what's right in your own eyes. So, yeah, I mean, it's no bread. I'll tell you when the victory, which is silly because they just saw clearly God take care of his people.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
think
it
about it. There's 300 guys chasing 135,000 guys. I mean, come on. This is kind of weird. The God must be in this. But wait.
But until you do this, until you get this full and final victory, then it's their own perspective. It's their own eyes. That is the perspective.
And I would
that
say
they're
their
coming
own
from.
fear as well. And it's so they're like, no sandwich for you. No sandwich for you. So
No soup for you.
no. And from there, Gideon, went up to Penuel and spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. So, okay, now you got...
2 towns.
Seriously. And he said to the men of Penuel, when I come back again in peace, I will break down this tower.
Yeah, he's exhausted. And
He's
this is where
hangry.
you he's, come on. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think he's been at war. He's lots of days fighting. He and his men are exhausted. They are frustrated. They've been running terrain. They're exhausted. They're hangry.
And they see
all
this
they're
city, and they're probably hopeful. Like, okay, at least we'll get somebody to help us.
Yeah, Penuel. No, and it's so, in his exhaustion, how does Gideon respond? Well, not well. Not well. And I don't mean to say, well, in his exhaustion, he had a right to respond the way he did. He did not. You start to see this downward spiral of he and the people not following the Lord. And again, there's no prayer, there's no worship. They had that. It was 6 and 7. It was happening. And all of a sudden, through all of this, and you're not treating me right, and you're not doing right, but then my response isn't right either. And so he's got these 2 towns. In town number 1, he's like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to whip you publicly. It's like publicly humiliate you. This was his own nation. Not a good response. Yeah, to evil, not a good response, right? So they were not to treat him because he was family in that way. But he's not to retaliate in the same way, because the law would speak to both of those aspects of knock it off. Like, this is, you're not seeking the Lord, you're not praying, you're not worshiping, and as a result, there's this downward spiral, bad decisions as a result of his frustration and exhaustion and at war. And then the town of Penuel wasn't any different, right? And he goes, so 2 places God's people were supposed to be worshiping. They're not worshiping, clearly. The people there, led by their leaders, they're not worshiping God. God's servants and soldiers, led by Gideon, they show up. Could you feed the army that's fighting for you? No. Could you feed the army that's fighting for you? No. When you've won the victory, then you get your sandwich. And so you just see some fair weather fans. You see this. It's all coming from what I said. It's all this. It's all, the eyes are not on the Lord. It's just on everything external.
Yeah, and it's like we do the same thing, don't we? Where we justify treating other people poor. We justify our own like vengeance, our own retaliation by what someone else did. It's like, oh, well, they did this, and so that justifies what I'm doing here. It's like I was vindicated. It was like I took justice into my own hands. It's like I did that, it's like I did that to them because they did this to me, and so it's all fair. And it's like, no, just because someone sins against you, it doesn't give you the right to give them in turn.
Isn't that so often the case with when you read the story of Israel, like all through the Old Testament, where you're like, wow, horrible, and then you like stop and you're
And
like,
look in the mirror and
I
you're
know,
like,
you're
Yeah,
like,
I
"Oh,
do that.
wait, I do that.
I'm an Israelite.
No.
Yeah, but I think that whole the buck stops here. Remember that old? I can't remember what president or somebody said that, but the whole idea is you got to. I'm going to end this. Like I'm not going to retaliate because somebody's got to be the peacemaker, and so that's a good application. I think
He
for
could
all of
have
us.
done it. He could have at that point. No sandwich. He could have said, "Man, sucketh Penuel, you're known for worship. You're known for praying, but." Me and my men, we're going to worship God right now, and we're going to invite you to join us in seeking the Lord and worshiping. You saw that in chapter 6 and 7. But all of a sudden, it's not happening from the people. It's not happening from the leadership, and you start to see the increasing fallout.
So he shakes his fist at them and he says, "Oh, you're going to get your comeuppance." And then he continues on. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with their army, about 15,000 men, all who were left of all the army of the people of the east, for there had fallen 120,000 men who drew the sword. So think about that, going back to the original attack, if you will, which wasn't an attack at all. It was yelling, breaking pots and trumpets and such. But the Lord is the one who it was, the battle was the Lord's, right? That 15,000 men were left. And Gideon went up by the way of the tent dwellers east of Nobah and Jogbeha. I was doing so well. And attacked the army, for the army felt secure. Okay, stop it right there. We feel pretty good. Like he's not going to come and get us. We feel pretty secure. Well, Gideon is still attacking. God is still winning the war, right? And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and captured the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and he threw all the army into a panic. Again, 300 guys against 15,000. This is incredible. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, and he captured a young man of Succoth and questioned him. This is interesting. Okay, so he's got the two kings, and now he grabs this one guy. He's from Succoth, and he asks him this question. He said, "Write down for me the officials and elders of Succoth, 77 men." So this guy says, he's who are your leaders in Succoth? And the guy from Succoth is like, "Oh, these guys," and write them down quick, right? And he came to the men of Succoth, and he said, "Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are exhausted?" Okay. This is so amazing. And he took the elders of the city, and he took thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them taught the men of Succoth a lesson. I like how that's written.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, boy. So there he did that. And then, and Penuel, he broke down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city.
Yeah. The power gone awry.
Perhaps.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, this middle section here, isn't it?
Oh,
like,
wow.
even as you're reading, it's like, and what do you even say about that? Grant, what do we say about that? Like, is it, they didn't seek God's guidance. And that's why all these things that are happening, you're like, was that good? Was that bad? Seems to be pretty, like, this fallout, right?
Yeah.
They're not seeking God's guidance in this attack. Gideon could not have prevailed without God. I think that's one of the big things in it. And God's not attributed. He's not, and you see God continuing to work, even though Gideon's heart is not right with God. I think clearly from even what we've seen in chapter 8, at this point, from the beginning and kind of increasing on, you see this heart of pride. You see this heart that's not following the law of the Lord. It's not seeking the Lord. Gideon, he's not walking with God. He's not seeking God for guidance. No one is at this point. It's nowhere written. And I would, like, as you read, I'm like, why would God assist him? Why would God do that? And is it 2 Timothy 2? God is faithful even when we're faithless. Like, and God's got purposes, and God's doing things, and God's watching over his nation. And even when they're not right, they're not seeking him. Is all that?
Well, can I ask you a
okay?
question? Because sometimes, like, if you're looking at Moses, right, the account of Moses, so go back a number of years, and there are these people who were rebelling against Moses, right? And the Lord was really heavy-handed, right? And he actually opened up the earth, and all these people fell into the earth, and that was a judgment. Like, his people were supposed to be set apart, right? Set apart. And when people of other nations look at God's chosen nation,
Sure.
who he built up, right? They're supposed to have the fear of the Lord in them. And if his very people are rebelling against him, there's going to be a judgment because just because they're supposed to be ambassadors for the Lord, right? So my question is, and maybe we don't have the answer, and that's cool too. Could we think that maybe the Lord is judging Sukkoth and Penuel for their unfaithfulness because of just they're not following the Lord either, and they're going
Yeah.
against their brother, and clearly God is with Gideon, and I'm just wondering, would that be something the Lord might do?
I think absolutely might.
Okay.
Absolutely possible. Can we look at it and say, here's exactly what the Lord is doing? I think we just have these promises that the Lord watches over his people, and sometimes that includes discipline. Sometimes that it's the hand of the Lord that is working in such a way that you see from top down sin. Like we can see from Penuel and what was the other sin?
Sukkoth.
Sukkoth, the sins of the people, the sins of the leader, the sins of, and then because of the dual sins coming from both, you see this, they're hitting up against one another, where the Lord is just, like you get even reading through all of chapter 8, not just this section here. I think it's very likely is the Lord's discipline on these towns, on these cities, on these. Does that mean like Gideon's doing the right thing here? No, I don't think so, because the law says no, not that way, right? But God using all these different aspects of all these different things and all these bad responses to discipline his children, all of them, right? So I think it's very fair. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I think we can have this idea that because it happens in the Bible, that means that everything that's in the Bible is sanctioned by God. Everything is approved by God, and that's not really the case. Oftentimes, we see things in the Bible that God doesn't prescribe, that He doesn't tell us to do. It isn't instructional, and I would look at much of the life of Gideon. And I would say most of this is not instructional. We
Right.
don't see that anywhere else in Scripture where we're told to do these things. Like we talked about the test that Gideon put towards God the other day, where he put out this fleece and he said, well, if this is what you want me to do in the morning, let the fleece be just drenched in dew and the ground around it be dry. And God did that. He gave Gideon that sign. And Gideon said, well, if you're don't be angry with me, but please, I really need this assurance. He put out the fleece again, and he said, tomorrow morning, let the ground be covered in dew, but this fleece be completely dry. And God did that too. I think that's not a prescription. That's not something that we're also supposed to do. The Bible doesn't say, go and do likewise there.
Right.
And so I think that's important for us to note that when it comes to these actions of Gideon, that the Bible isn't saying, yes, you should also, if anyone doubts the Lord's anointed, then let them
Be scourged with
suffer.
briars and
Let them
thorns.
suffer the consequences.
Oh, man, Grant, I thought I had my life
No,
first.
yeah.
I'm just going to go whip my enemy.
Yeah.
Just destroy him.
Give me a savage.
What a killjoy, Grant.
I think that's a really an apt way of communicating that,
Yeah.
Grant. Very good. And again, you hear a lot of Bible critics, who really are not being honest when they approach the Word of God, and then they'll say things like, "Oh, look what your God has done." Well, God does not. If there's a sin, God will redeem a situation. But
Yes.
the point of it is, and like you keep saying, and I appreciate this, Chad, this is not in the law of God. A lot of what was happening here, that was not part of the law of the Lord. They're going against it. And so I think we just need to understand and put that into perspective.
Yeah.
God's ways are good. When somebody does something against the Lord's way, it's cringy at best.
Yeah.
Right. But there's some devastating consequences. And I think we're seeing a lot of that here in Gideon's life already.
Yeah, I agree. At a practical level, we just kind of step away from the story and just say, what do we learn? What do we see as God's people? Let's humble yourself, seek the Lord in all the different decisions that you have through the course of your life. Worship him, follow him, seek him. Like, don't take matters into your own hands. Don't seek the vengeance. Call upon the Lord, submit yourself to the Lord, seek his will always. These are different aspects that you don't see God's people doing. I marked down as I was thinking through this story yesterday, 2 Chronicles 7:14. It's a very familiar verse, but it speaks to God's people and what you see them not doing here. It says, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I'll hear from heaven, will forgive their sin and heal their land. And you see this opposite of where they were called to humble themselves. You see this pride start to rising from God's people and God's leaders, and even from the judge, that they're not seeking the Lord that they were beforehand. And you see the follow, humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord. He will exalt you. And you see the opposite now as we even continue on into chapter 8 and where this is all headed and what starts to happen in the life of Gideon. As a result of all this, he's not following the Lord. He's mistreating God's people. What happens in his heart in these ways. But seek the Lord. Seek the Lord always for guidance in ways that God's people and Gideon were not doing.
Mm-hmm. We continue on. Then he said to Zeba and Zalmunna, they're still alive, right? Where are the men whom you killed at Tabor? Okay, so this sounds a little disjointed, but let's continue.
What verse are you?
Oh, I'm on 18.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. And they answered, as you are, so were they. Every one of them resembled the son of a king. And he said, they were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you. So he said to Jether, his firstborn, so Gideon says to Jether, his firstborn, rise and kill them. But the young man did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a young man. And then Zeba and Zalmunna said, rise yourself and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose and killed Zeba and Zalmunna, and he took the crescent ornaments that were on the necks of their camels. And we're going to learn more about the camels. So this is a weird aside. What did your studies show? I'll tell you what I studied, but I want to know what you think.
It's definitely a downward spiral here. I mean, his brother dies in battle. We see that. This is a public event here. I mark that down. Is Gideon saying we need to kill these political leaders? We need to destroy them. He kills them, prisoners of war. Go get them. It's interesting. They're Ishmaelites.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's interesting. There's a bitter vengeance in this man, and bitterness is a word that kept jumping off the page. It's like, well, here we go. This is where bitterness goes. Don't let bitterness take root. Ephesians 4 says, "For out of the heart comes the wellspring of life." Like all these wisdom pieces of scripture where you can start to go, I see it. You see it happening in the life of Gideon here. He's not rightly processing grief. I think that would be another piece. His son died in battle. I think he's a hurting man. He's grieving. He's got all these. He's not bringing his bitterness to God. He's taking out his bitterness and vengeance on the people around him. Want to chime in? What other aspects of this?
As you're talking, it brings to mind too, like he's really personalized this, which again, I get that with the battle, like what you're saying. But here's Zeba and Zalmunna, and they are the Midianites, and God, they're wicked people. We can't forget these are wicked people. Throughout all of Deuteronomy, it says how detestable their practices are. And so when God brought the Israelites into the land to take it, that was part of the judgment on these wicked people. And so here, Gideon is saying, listen, you killed my brothers. You killed my brothers, and now I'm going to kill you. But really, that was not the purpose. Really, it was, listen, you did not you are wicked people, and you go against the God of Israel. It should have been a glory to the Lord. God told Gideon and all of them to utterly destroy the people in the land of Canaan. But he's telling them it was because of his brothers that they killed. But really, he should have really given the glory to the Lord and said, listen, this is for the Lord.
Yeah.
Because that's how we started out in the beginning, right? It's for the Lord, the Lord's sword, and for Gideon. Remember the mantra, the cry out that it was when all 300 of the guys were
right.
breaking their jars, and
Yeah.
and here it's clearly now it's Gideon. It's all about Gideon and his family. And I think what's really interesting here too is a culture situation, because here he's saying, listen, where are those guys? And they're like, oh, they're flattering him. They looked like the kings. Like he's not a king. He's not a king.
He's not.
And
Yeah.
and yet they're trying to flatter him and say, well, they had the bearing of a king, just as you, right? And then Gideon's like, oh, I'm going to get my son to kill them. Well, here's the problem with that. They would not want a young guy to kill them. These are seasoned battling men, right? They are warriors. And what a insult. What an insult and injury to them if a young boy basically killed them. And so that's what Gideon was trying to do. And that's why they were taunting him as well. At least that's what I'm seeing in my studies. And of course, Gideon, he just arises and kills them and is done with it. But there's a lot of pride going on here. There's no glory to the Lord. The Lord's not even a mention in Gideon's heart. And I think that's just to your point.
Yeah. I think they go together. I appreciate your studies, by the way. This is because I think it flows right with the whole context of chapters 6 through 8 and all the things that are happening. So good insights. The pride is rising. God is accomplishing, even through the hearts that aren't seemingly they're not driven toward Him. So yeah, good insights.
Just fascinating stuff here. And so we continue on. Oh, I wanted to just mention, going back to 8:1. Then the men of Ephraim said to him, what is this that you've done to us, not to call us when you went to fight against Midian? And remember, if we remember, the Lord, it was like, hey, call the people. And then a bunch of guys came, and then God whittled it down to 300 people. And I think that's important because they were accusing him very fiercely, it says in verse 1. And then Gideon said to them, what have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the grape harvest of Abiezer? He's talking about his dad's family, right? And he says, God has given into your hands the princes of Midian, Orb, and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you? He's recognizing their prowess as warriors, that they were strong, but he's also saying, hey, this is the Lord's thing, right? And then their anger subsided after he said that.
Yeah.
And I think that's important that we see, at least at that point, Gideon saying, who am I? It was not me.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that,
Yeah,
or am I missing the point there?
No, I think that's right. There would be potential. Like, is that their jealousy? Is that who's wrong here? What's happening? Should he have invited these people? Are these people in the wrong for coming, saying, are they just jealous of not being involved? Like, if the battle didn't go the way that, if they would have been defeated, are they going still saying, why didn't you invite us to be a part of this failure? It seems to be in the reading that the heart of Gideon is good. He's following the Lord, and that in this, that he should have invited these people in, could have invited them in. Different potentials there, but different things happening there. It's hard to say, but as I was kind of reading some of these things on this, it's like, well, who's jealous of who here? Is he jealous of of Ephraim, and
right.
So he's not inviting them in to be a part of it, or are they jealous of him? Maybe why didn't you invite us in? We have all the answers. We have all the. I don't see any of that. So it's just an interesting kind of
aside
segment there that kind of is between these different things that are happening. That's wow, that's fascinating.
All right, let's get to this
Where
part is
are we at
the
here?
head scratcher here.
Oh, boy.
The men of Israel then says again, this is afterwards, they said, rule over us and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. So basically, Gideon, be our king, right? Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. That's good. Good job. I'm going to put that in the win column for Gideon. Can I?
I think so.
Okay. Because then Gideon said, now, let me make a request of you. Oh, here we go. Every one of you give the earrings from the spoil, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. That's I guess, what the Ishmaelites wore.
Right.
And they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw in it the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. Okay, so that's a lot. Besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of the camels. So nice stuff here. Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city in Ophrah. And all I don't even want to say the word. All of Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more, and the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Let's just stop there. We don't need to go any further. This time is running out, but I do want to focus on what just happened. What just happened? Everything was going so well. No, I'm not going to be your king. Oh, yeah, give me all your gold. Oh, ephod. First off, what's an ephod? Let's talk about what an ephod is.
You studied it.
Oh, okay.
Like we were looking at the pictures before we got on air.
I didn't know what an ephod was. I thought it was a
It
scepter.
had to do with the priest.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And the priest would wear, it's like a tunic, right? And it's beautiful. It's laced with gold and beautiful colors and whatever. And then on top of that, again, we're talking a priest, the Israelite priests. And then over top of that would be the breastplate, right? Which would have all the stones of and the Urim and the Thummim and so
Yeah,
on and so forth.
yeah.
But this is a priestly garment.
he had partial obedience to the law.
Eek.
Like it was, no, I'm not going to be your Lord. I'm not going to be the king, but I want to be a priest. Like that's, so it's really strange. You see, it's this, I've used this word, trajectory of pride. And then, like where through the story. And then as we've gone through it, it's even been, does he have pride there? Does he not? Does he have where you see it increasing at least? And here you see it like, yeah, pride leads to greed. And that's really what you see in this. The nation had a misguided desire for Gideon to be king. They lost their way. They're not seeking the Lord. They're just looking at human power. They're just looking at human victory. This is what we said all throughout. They're not seeing and rejoicing and celebrating and worshiping the Lord for the Lord's victory. It's all external. Here's our guy. He's powerful. He's strong. He's got the victory. This is going to be our guy. There's no humility.
Yeah. There's this real thing that happens when we're chosen by God for a purpose that we think, I was chosen because I have some quality in myself. God chose me because I'm special, and not that we lose sight of God using us and how humiliating it is just to see the power of God. And that's what we miss. We see the vessel, the conduit, and we forget where the power is, who God is, and we don't glorify him. Instead, we end up worshiping the ephod.
And I think it's really striking to see in Deuteronomy 12, where God says, you shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, meaning that all these other ways are wrong. God gets to choose how you worship him because he's God.
He perverted the ephod.
Yeah.
God's priests were to lead people to show the love of God, and he used it that the people would love him. It was a complete reversal in that it was designed that the people would love God, and here he was, and it was an exaltation of himself. It's greed and pride.
But we see in Hebrews chapter 11 that Gideon is mentioned. And then 11:32, and what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, all these people and all the prophets. These are in the hall of faith, people who had faith in the Lord, and by faith they pleased God, because it says without faith it's impossible to please God.
Amen.
And so, in like 3 seconds, what does that mean for us? We have little faith.
Yeah, to walk by faith and not by sight. I mean, that's the start of Hebrews chapter 11. This is faith. It's that don't look externally, don't look circumstantially. Whatever you have before you, we are to walk in faith. to trust God, to believe God, to seek God, to worship God. Look at 6 and 7 of Judges and say, like that. Look at 8 and say, not like that. Let's walk by faith.
And that starts with a relationship with Jesus Christ. Put your faith in Jesus Christ, who is the author and perfecter of your faith and your salvation. Thank you so much, Pastor Chad.
You're
This has been
welcome.
such an amazing conversation. Thank you, dear friend, for listening.